Welcome to another exciting episode of Marvelous Videos. I'm your host, Tia Aya, half human, half sheep, monster, and zombie sheep from Black Sheep Explained. Reciting the kids' poem Baa Baa, Black Sheep will never be easy after watching this 2006 horror film Black Sheep, written and directed by Jonathan King. Something went terribly wrong with a genetic engineering experiment in a New Zealand farm to produce high-quality sheep as it transformed the harmless sheep into carnivorous monsters, terrorizing the farms of New Zealand. The film stars Nathan Meister as Henry Oldfield, Peter Feeney as Angus Oldfield, Danielle Mason as Experience, Tammy Davis as Tucker, and Olivia Driver as Grant. Despite being a low-budget film, Jonathan King's direction is pretty impressive as the movie is exceptionally well made and never loses focus for once. The film displays some top-notch gore as the animatronics and special effects are handled by Weta Workshop, including participation from Richard Taylor, the founder and creative director of Weta Workshop. The use of natural sheep as monsters makes them really scary. The viral outbreak becomes double trouble as the zombie sheep develop a quenchless desire for human flesh, while their bite would convert any human into a half-human, half-sheep monster. The film premiered at the 31st Toronto Film Festival and was released in New Zealand on 29th March 2007. Let us visit the sheep farm in New Zealand and learn how all of this started. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Get ready for the violence of the lambs. Black Sheep released in 2006. The film commenced in the lush green sheep farm of the Oldfields in New Zealand, where young Henry lived and his elder brother Angus and their father. Henry's father was very impressed with Henry's natural ability in the field of sheep farming, making Angus jealous for his younger brother. He played a very cruel prank by killing Henry's pet sheep and then wearing the upper half of the sheep himself to scare Henry. That was quite terrible indeed. Henry almost collapsed from the shock of this prank when their housekeeper, Miss Mack, informed them that their father had died of an accident. As an effect of the combined shock, Henry developed an unusual phobia of sheep. After 15 years, as Henry returned to his farm, his taxi was surrounded by a flock of sheep. We got a glimpse of this phobia as he grew very restless and his breath became heavier with a panic attack. Finally, the flock of sheep moved away, and Henry reached his farmhouse. Meanwhile, two animal rights activists, Grant and Experience, silently sneaked into Angus's farm to investigate the genetic experiment secretly being carried out in a lab. Grant suddenly stole a container of waste and ran off, but he tripped while running and broke the container. A tiny sheep in fetus form crawled out and bit him vigorously before biting another adult sheep. Angus, a gentleman farmer, handed a $2 million check to buy off Henry's share of the farm and rehearsed a speech for introducing his new breed of sheep. Before leaving, Henry and Tucker went up for a drive up the hill, but their way was blocked by a sheep whose nose was bleeding. Actually, that was the first sheep that was bitten by the fetus sheep. Meanwhile, Experience joined them in an attempt to find Grant. Soon the three reached a farmer's house and found his mutilated body. Guess who the killer is? The mutated sheep that had turned carnivorous. The killer sheep started attacking them, while a flock of carnivorous sheep surrounded the house. Henry was almost on the verge of another panic attack, but somehow the trio managed to get into the truck. A monster sheep somehow got inside the truck, and even after a tremendous fight, it managed to bite Tucker in the foot. On the other side of the farm, Angus got bitten by Grant, who had transformed into a zombie-like creature. As the group entered the lab, they realized that the genetic experiment that Angus had initiated transformed the sheep into carnivorous monsters. But they were yet to learn that whomever these sheep bit would be converted into a half-human, half-sheep monster. The scientist was intrigued with Tucker's condition, and soon she discovered that Tucker's foot had become a sheep's hoof. Tucker was held back by experiments, but Henry and Experience fled from the lab. Where would they go? Wherever they looked, there were sheep everywhere, fiercely advancing towards them. Having nowhere to go, Henry and Experience went inside the offal pit, which was surrounded by a gate and barbed wire. Accidentally, both of them slipped into the pit, full of bloody organs and creatures. Thank God Experience was carrying a candle and lighter, which helped them walk through the pit's pitch-dark tunnel. After emerging out of the pit, they entered a wool shed on hearing some noise. Experience finally found Grant there, but in a giant wool sheep farm. She even even scolded Grant after eating meats as they were apparently vegetarians, and though he did appear guilty for a moment, he soon resumed his attacks. By the way, 4 people were involved in operating this giant monster sheep suit in the set. Back in the lab, as Tucker transformed into a sheep, the scientist administered an injection that converted him back into human form. When the scientist went out to check on her partner and Angus, she was attacked and killed by the monster sheep. The disemboweled corpses were terrifying. On the other side, Angus was trying to impress his delegates with a speech, but he was constantly losing his composure as the sheep's gene seems to take over. When he uncrated his Oldfield sheep, it called out to the farmer's other sheep, which started approaching and gathering in huge flocks, and soon they started ripping out the organs of whomever they encountered. With his ongoing transformation into a sheep, Angus was spared from being attacked by the monstrous flock of sheep. We could see that his wounded hand had turned into a hoof of sheep. Miss Mack appeared in her car and rescued Henry and Experience to the house. Angus revealed that his sheep had been genetically engineered using Oldfield family DNA.
One of us. It's family. What?
He then tried to reach his airplane and escape with his new breed of sheep as the siblings faced each other for a final confrontation. But that time Angus had fully transformed into a giant were-sheep, and Henry was no match for him. Somehow Henry used his sheepdog and placed Angus in a position where the propeller of the blade could slice him. Still, Angus was alive while Tucker showed up and used the same fluid used on him to cure Henry and Angus. A badly injured Angus still offered himself to the flock of sheep, but this time they started ripping him apart. As the sheep farted methane, Henry threw the lighter to incinerate them all with a blast. The movie concluded with Tucker and Henry helping all the infected people get back to their human forms, and amidst the happy ending, we see the sheepdog standing on the hill and letting out a baa. After the sheep became carnivorous, there was a lot of blood, gore, and disemboweled bodies everywhere. The special effects of the Weta Workshop were quite remarkable, and the transformation from the human to were-sheep and vice versa, though not as effective as the legendary transformation in An American Werewolf in London, is still pretty impressive. The best thing about the film is that it had a perfect blend for everything, making it highly entertaining. Nathan Meister strikes the right balance between his phobia and his struggle to survive, with equal support from Peter Feeney and his hatred for a sibling, obsession with sheep, and maintenance of his status. Danielle Mason was adorable in her performance and looked perfect in her role. Tammy Davis was so focused that he worked on a farm to perfect his role as Tucker. The film was shot in and around Wellington in New Zealand. Finally, Weta Workshop and his director Richard Taylor did a spectacular job in making the sheep do what they would never do in real life. As the debut film of Jonathan King, I must say the film is quite brilliant, despite some flaws here and there. Virus that turns man into half-human, half-sheep monster, and zombie sheep explained. We all know that Angus Oldfield was secretly experimenting on a genetic mutation to produce a serial breed of sheep to be introduced into the world. But the experiment ended up creating a virus that turned the sheep rabid. The entire episode would have been concealed from the outside world, but the endeavor of Grant and Experience exposed everything. And thanks to Grant's brilliant effort, the virus that was going to waste got released into the outside world. In fact, Grant was the first person who was bitten by the monstrous sheep fetus, and we immediately see the effect as the vegetarian Grant grabbed a cute little rabbit and started eating his raw flesh. The fetus doesn't stop there. With great difficulty, it climbed uphill, and when an adult sheep came to help the struggling fetus, it got bitten and infected. Within some time, we find that almost all the sheep on the farm have been infected as they start attacking, killing, and devouring anyone they encounter. On the other hand, Grant, apart from turning carnivorous, almost got transformed into a giant half-sheep, half-human monster who is vicious and monstrous. In the case of human beings, it is to be noted that they retain their memory and intelligence even after getting infected or transformed into a were-sheep. Grant was the only infected person who could be observed closely. He was seen taunting Angus about his work and in the end quickly bit his hand and ran off. Thus, the act of karma was fulfilled. Angus got infected with the virus which he had created. He also seemed to remember Experience and the fact that he had been a vegetarian vegetarian, but there is no stopping the effect of the deadly virus that had converted the human beings into savage predators. The were-sheep monsters were bipedal and used their forelimbs to attack apart from their teeth. Another thing to be noted is that if a person gets infected with the virus, and no matter which stage of transformation the person is in, the sheep will no longer attack them. Hence, we see amidst the massive rampage of the sheep during the launch program of the new breed, all the monstrous sheep spared Angus. No matter how powerful and ruthless the rabid sheep and the were-sheep had been, they were vulnerable to all kinds of weapons meant to kill any living organism. As claimed by experience, the gas emitted by a sheep's fart is methane, which is highly flammable, and proved to be true in the end. When all the sheep were held in an enclosure and they farted, Henry threw a lighter, which blasted the entire area as all the sheep along the Angus were engulfed in flames. However, there was a cure to convert the were-sheep back to human form. Tucker was the first person who converted back into a human form by the scientist in the lab. Tucker was smart enough to get hold of the fluid and eventually converted all of the infected people back to their human forms. Why should you watch Black Sheep? There is a scene where Tucker, Henry, and Experience had jumped from the truck, but the sheep was seen behind the wheels as the truck rolled down the hill. It is heard that the filming of the scene took several days to shoot. Some films may not be the greatest blockbusters or award-winning films, yet they are worth watching. Black Sheep is one such film, brimming with entertainment. The performance, as said earlier, is fantastic. The concept of transforming an innocent-looking sheep into a carnivorous monster must be challenging. The subtle touch of humor makes the film even more watchable. There is plenty of horror and bloodshed that can make you nauseous, but that is what horror films are all about. Amidst all the horror and commotion, the gorgeous view of New Zealand is so mesmerizing that it takes your breath away. Thank you for watching another episode of Marvelous Videos. I look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm your host, Tia Aya. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.